A few months ago, I bought this almost 70-year-old steel barge. So far, I showed you how I had it transported more than 500 kilometers over land, how it arrived here in Berlin, and how I put it at its current spot. I've also given you a quick tour of the inside of the boat and showed you how I started the cleaning process. Now, what I haven't told you so far is what I actually plan to do with it. And it's not because I'm a cruel YouTuber who likes to torture his audience by withholding information, rather than the fear of the embarrassment if I were to reveal my plans and then can't follow through for whatever reason. This being said, I feel very confident at the moment that I can actually achieve what I plan to do. And so I think I'm ready to reveal to you at least part of the plans I have for this vessel. The original purpose of this boat was to be a floating excavator platform. It's meant to be pushed or pulled by another boat and therefore did not require its own engine or steering mechanism. So in order for me to register this boat as a recreational vessel, I will need to add all these missing elements in order to make this boat self-propelling, maneuverable, and most importantly, safe on the waters. To demonstrate these plans to you, I have recreated a 3D model of the boat in this simple but efficient software called SketchUp. Now, the model is not 100% accurate because recreating these curved shapes is kind of complex and I didn't really have the time to get that deep into it, but it is to scale and it should be enough for today's purpose. I'll start with the most challenging upgrade I need to do, and that would be to build an engine room where we can later fit the engine. And yes, I'm gonna go with an inboard motor rather than an outboard, even though an outboard would be considerably easier to fit, but I just prefer an inboard motor when possible. For this, we're gonna need to cut open part of the deck and weld in some steel plates to create the walls and ceiling, and it should be high enough for even the tallest mechanic to be able to stand inside. While making this video, I actually got an idea for how to make the engine room even more spacious, and so I can use this opportunity to show you briefly how this software works. So the idea would be to raise the entire width of the aft deck and then put in these stairs, ideally on both sides, so that you can in this way access it from the lower deck. But for the sake of today's video, let's go back to the old design. Next, we have to build a structure on the main deck. For this, I plan to build a steel framework which will allow me to build walls, a ceiling and a roof. And because the framework itself is made of steel, I can use pretty lightweight materials such as wood and aluminum for the rest. I showed this design to a steelworker/engineer and he told me that I can even remove every other of these steel frames as long as I strengthen the remaining ones by diagonally running flat profiles or steel cables in between them. This will give us an almost 50 square meter room, which should be sufficient for whatever purpose I eventually come up with for the boat. In terms of headroom, I plan to have an interior ceiling height of at least 2 meters 20. I just have to make sure that the total height of the boat, once in the water, does not exceed about 3 meters 60, 3 meters 70, which will allow it to pass underneath pretty much any bridge in the area. Alright, now we get to the most important part of this video, namely what's gonna happen below the waterline. I'll start here at the rear, where you can see that I will add a fin, which will guide the water flow towards the propeller. Above the fin, we will need to cut a big hole into the hull, because I won't use a drive shaft, but instead a stern drive. More details about the stern drive and exactly how we're gonna put it in, and also about the motor that's gonna power it for that matter, will be revealed in future videos. These 3 bars here, you can see in the forward half of the hull, will act as a keel. Apparently, these bars alone will create sufficient drag to stabilize the boat against sideward movement. I got this suggestion from a shipbuilding engineer with whom I'm developing the concept for the boat. The same person also told me that these edges here on the side of the boat also provide a lot of resistance against sideward movement. In theory, when a fluid, which can be air or water, encounters a smooth, unbroken surface, it can flow past it without creating too much resistance. If, however, the surface is uneven, broken, or suddenly stops, the fluid will create a turbulence, which will lead to increased friction in that area and thus create a drag to the flow of fluids in that area. Now, if we look at the boat as a whole, imagine that we have a wind blowing from one side, thus pushing the boat in that direction. This in turn will create a water flow below the waterline in the opposite direction, which, if it encounters some obstacles, will create turbulences in those areas. And those turbulences will create a resistance force in the opposite direction than the boat is being pushed by the wind, thus creating drag and slowing down the movement in that direction. Being aware of those principles allows us to take advantage of them, creating smooth surfaces where we want to enable the free, undisturbed flow of the fluids, as well as broken surfaces and sharp edges where we want to slow down the flow of the fluids. And of course, another very important element for any boat of this size would be to add a bow thruster. And maybe we'll even need a couple. So there you have it. Those are the plans I have for my barge so far. And I would really like to hear your opinion on this, especially if you have any experience in this field. By all means, feel free to share your suggestions. Now then, as a little Easter egg at the end of this video, I will tell you what happened to the other boats you've seen on this channel before. Well, long story short, I've sold them all. For one, because I really needed the money for this current project. For another, because I didn't really have a spot where to put them. The last thing I need in my current situation is to have a bunch of unmanned boats floating in the middle of a lake, causing worries, cost, and potentially trouble if something were to go wrong. And so you might ask yourself, why would this guy buy all these boats, spend enormous amounts of energy, time and money on them, and then sell them when they are finished or almost finished without ever really enjoying them? Well, that's a good point you bring up there, but you see, for me, the greatest pleasure in dealing with boats comes from taking on a challenge, learning about the technology involved, figuring out solutions to various problems, and then solving those problems as good as possible with the limited resources I have at hand, and especially learning invaluable lessons along the way. So, the essence of what I'm saying is that today the boats are gone, but the knowledge and skills I gained from them will stay with me till the end of my days. Now, in all fairness, I have to admit that I have a pretty short attention span. I get bored quickly, and I tend to make compulsive purchase decisions. I'm gonna leave that statement there for you to make of it what you want. And with that, I'm gonna say goodbye to you. Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you in the next video, where I will show you the new boat that I just bought.